On this episode of Full Bore, we're going to do an autopsy on this 3AC Toyota engine. So this is a clapped out 3A engine which came out of an A82 Corolla. You probably would have seen me take this out of the vehicle 2 episodes ago. But what we're going to do in this episode is actually whip the sump off and give it a quick crack-a-do underneath and see if the motor is actually worth saving and putting back in the vehicle. And you might actually see an episode of me doing a dodgy rebuild on it in the near future if this motor isn't absolute trash balls. But, yeah, we'll see how we go. Those wheels are annoying me greatly. I'm gonna get a bit of the old WD onto these bad boys. Yes. A bit of the old cricket swaz, as the oldies like to call it. The cricket's urine. And this will make the wheels move in utter efficiency. Ooh. Rule number 1 when working with motors such as this, I mean this isn't a very big motor, it's only a 1.5 litre, but that probably weighs about 150 to 160 kilos or something around about that. Certainly weighs more than me, and that's a big weight. But when you're lifting these up, you don't want them swinging around, and you want to wear good footwear, because if you get one of these dropping on your feet, of course, you're going to smash all your toes. That's why you want a set of good shoes, such as these Havaianas, because they should protect this vital area of your foot, and that's really what you want in a shoe. Anyway, we'll move this out. And everything is oily, and that is delicious. So, what I've actually done with this motor to try and get it to last a little bit longer is I used, what was it? That Maury's engine stabilizer in it, like that engine oil stabilizer, and that's coupled with some like really thick boy 2050 oil. And it's ended up all over my floor, and it's like stepping on honey. It's beautifully delicious. And that said, it didn't actually work that well. It still smashed its big ends like a thing that smashes big ends quite often. There's nothing that you can really make an analogy out of in regards to that, because nothing really correlates with this sort of situation. But yeah, interesting times we live in. Yes. We mean business now. Like the clutchy boy. Oh no. Look at that delicious clutch juice. And I left the motor sitting out in the rain, and now the clutch looks like crap. But she'll be right. That's actually not in bad nick, that clutch, all things considering, even though that car has been absolutely trashed. And there's always the last one. That is the hardest. Delicious. Oh! Okay. Now for the fun bit. The sump has been mangled due to the Corolla actually being smashed up on a log whilst we were racing at one time, which was a beautiful sight to see, but Maybe I'll have to smash that out with a hammer and put like a nice big sump guard over it at some stage, but that's not what we're here for at the moment. We're here to see whether or not this motor will live again. Oh no, I dropped the book. Good enough. So, top tip of the day. Old pistons make really, really good little trays to put nuts and bolts in. I'll put that in my stash of little nuts and bolts. So, okay, now we're up to the stage where I've got to use my karate moves to remove this sump. I'll just make sure all the bolts are off first so I don't actually hurt myself. So, sort of like a twist and push motion like that. I'll grab the hammer. Where's my rubber mallet gone? What the heck? Oh, here it is. Oh, delicious! So when you're removing components out of an engine such as this and you're getting really in depth, it's actually very important that you put the corresponding item back into its spot. So in this case I'm actually going to be removing the big end bearings, or the big end caps, off the end of the con rods. And if I want to use this motor again, you know, proper trade practices, you'd actually put each bearing cap back into the right location. So what I'm going to do is actually get a punch and pop on the end of each bearing cap which number it is from front to back on the spring. Just need a center punch. That one there ought to do it. So from front to rear, this one's number 2. You can see that there. This one's number 3. Number 4 down there. And of course, number 1 gets just 1. Actually, what I like to do, it's pretty common practice as well, is pop those nuts just back on the top there, and just give each one of them a tap, and that ensures that we do not damage the conrod bolts. Oof. Okay, so what's actually happened is it's spun a bearing, and I've got a feeling that this motor is jank. That bearing cap had grabbed really badly. So in essence, this motor is actually 100% trash. But I don't know, maybe if I just get a set of new bearings and get a bit of emery paper and give it a good old scrub-a-doo, we might actually be able to get this thing good enough to drive. So essentially this motor is actually in moderately good condition. It's just number one bearing is actually spun, but it actually hasn't damaged the crank that much. I reckon I could just get a bit of emery paper, slice it into a nice sort of slip that fits the journal, and just sit there and well, that'll conclude this episode of Full Bore. So essentially what we've found is that this motor, although really trash and probably not fit for use in the future, is not bad enough for us at Full Bore. So what we're going to do is spend a bit of money on what is essentially a boat anchor, whack it back in the vehicle, maybe in a couple of years' time when we get around to it, if I've got some time and get a bit of time off of work, and maybe you'll see this engine running again in a future episode of Full Bore.